thank you all for attending the Master Plan Housing Chapter for the town of Plymouth tonight.
And to make you another one.
There is a photographer in the room. It takes a while for the flash to warm up, so if he's standing in front of you for a few minutes, don't get awkward. Thank you very much. So, tonight we have two groups here, the Plymouth Planning Board, which I'll introduce momentarily, and Barrett Planning Group, who has been helping us with the housing master plan for the town of Plymouth. First, I'll introduce the planning board, myself, Matt Yetton. Susan Wood is with us tonight. John Christ, Molly McCann, there's Phil Lammer right there, thank you. My planner, Joseph Brez, and Avery Oakland. And then with us from Barrett Planning Group, we have Judy Barrett, Alexis Reynolds right there, and John Charles. Excellent. So they'll be leading the discussion tonight. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. This is the meeting agenda that we have laid out for everyone tonight, and someone from Barrett Planning will step up and take it from here.
Sure, no problem.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. So has everybody got an agenda? So years ago, when I thought I could live in two career worlds, I was teaching for quite a while, as well as doing this work day and night. And I often would go into my classroom, and all the students would be in the back of the room. Fill the seats as far back as they could go. So since this is sort of a small group, and we could all be a little closer together, how about if everybody just sort of comes up a bit, so I don't feel like I'm yelling? You can all come like closest with brothers. Sound like India's breath. See me. So, we're going to give a little bit of a background about the master plan and the master plan process in New Hampshire and what we're doing kind of fits into that. We'll talk a little bit too about the background, the town's background experience with what was called the Housing Opportunity Program grants at the previous round and kind of the work that came out of that. Because that's really a precursor for what we're doing now, which is a new Housing Opportunity Program grant to look at kind of an update of cover to do addition to the town's master plan, which did not exist before. And then we'll look at, we'll take a little bit of a break and ask if anybody has questions about the zoning proposals that are going before town meeting this year, and the planning board will kind of step out to the plate to answer any questions people have about those proposals. Then we sort of take this back and look at kind of trends that we see and how this process is going to go. And then we're going to break into a group activity, just where you talk, and then and we'll have sort of report out. It won't really be a report out because we're all going to stay together. But we'll do kind of a summary at the end about kind of what we heard from folks and how all of that's going to inform the development of this new chapter of your master plan. So a little bit of background about the master plan. We did not work on it. It was done in 2018. New Hampshire state law directs planning boards in every community to prepare and adopt a master plan. And now, interestingly about New Hampshire, there are only two sections required for master plan here, and it's a vision statement and then a land use analysis and a land use plan. There are lots of other components you can include, but it's all optional. So when Plymouth did the master plan in 2018, you in fact ended up with a vision statement and a land use, what we call land use element or land use component. And that's all led by the planning board. So your current vision statement is that Plymouth will be a place that has it all. The advantages of a small town friendliness, the energy and culture of a college town, a vibrant and walkable downtown, outdoor recreation, and a location that offers easy access to commerce and services, as well as the lakes region and the mountains. And there's one goal in the land use section that does relate specifically to housing, and it's encourage the development and maintenance of safe and affordable housing for residents of all ages. So we have a bit of a springboard here. But I think the expectation is that perhaps now starting this housing chapter, which doesn't exist at all right now, that's what we're doing, that might then enable the planning board to use that as kind of a springboard for an update of the entire plan. That decision hasn't been made yet, but I think that's sort of goal. So a little bit of background about these grants that existed here before and the work that was done on them that then led to where we are today. In the height of COVID, the federal government, as you probably know, made quite a bit of money available for communities to deal with recovery. And in New Hampshire, the state decided to put $100 million of Recovery Act money into this program called it was the Invest New Hampshire, and Housing Opportunity Grants were a piece of that. So Plymouth applied successfully and had a pretty significant grant out of what we call HOP1. So Housing Opportunity Program is HOP. I'm going to default to acronyms. I can't help myself. So HOP1 was a lot of the work that was done over the last couple of years. And that included a needs assessment to try to understand what the community's housing needs are, an audit of your regulations. So an audit is when a consultant who lives, sleeps, and eats and breathes zoning gets into your zoning, gets into your subdivision regulations, and tries to pull them apart to see where might there be impediments to addressing the housing needs that are identified in that first component of the process. And then coming out of the audit, the planning board gets to decide, well, the consultants identified all these various issues. Which ones do we want to take on? So that's very much a decision of the planning board. At the planning board's direction, we then drafted a number of zoning changes that went to town meeting and were approved. But there were a couple of pieces that didn't go because they needed more time for discussion, which is really kind of what you're going to be hearing about at town meeting, for this year. So the town went back to the HOP program again because the state said, you know what, we still have some money left. Let's see if we can encourage some more communities to look at housing issues. And so Plymouth went back and said, actually, we've done all this work on zoning. We've still got more zoning work to do, but we don't have any section in our master plan that's devoted specifically to housing. So we would like to do that. And part of what the state was trying to do with these HOP2 grants was to get communities to think about building more of a housing voice into their master plan. So Plymouth applied and was funded, and that's what we're working on now. When we worked on HOP1 grant, the first part, that needs assessment, which I referred to earlier, we sort of did a statistical look as well as a consultation with the community. And there's a lot in that needs assessment. I'm not going to go through every single piece of it, but just some highlights from it. We looked at the mix of housing in your community, the housing stock and the different neighborhoods, and how was the town organized. Looking at the impact of the college enrollment decline on your existing housing stock, looking demographically at what's happening with an aging population, increased interest at that point, and so I think many communities in New Hampshire kind of experienced this, of folks who basically left Massachusetts or whatever and said, hey, there's something going up there in New Hampshire where it's a little bit less dense, let's go. So there was kind of a shift that was happening in the market at that point, with people moving here year-round, people also buying homes for vacation purposes, and then more recently, I think what you're seeing is sort of an uptick in interest in what we call short-term rentals. We also looked at affordability gaps, and what that means is when you look at the market cost of housing, whether it's a rental unit or a home for sale, and then you look at the actual makeup of your households in your community and your incomes, we try to understand, is the housing that's available actually affordable to people who live here? Could someone who rents move into home ownership? And what we found, not surprisingly, was that there was a gap between what traditional Plymouth households could afford and what the market was actually demanding in terms of sale prices. And this was especially true among lower income homeowners, in some ways even more than renters. So we saw, kind of looking at market data and consulting with the community, kind of long-term development trends and obstacles to getting more housing built, in terms of a slowing of kind of construction, increased construction costs. We heard this loud and clear up here, and frankly, we hear it everywhere we work. Labor shortages and regulatory barriers. And when you put all those pieces together, as a community, you're going to have to say, well, which one of these can we fix? Because we probably can't do a whole heck of a lot about a labor shortage. We probably can't do a whole heck of a lot about, increasing construction costs, but we can do something about our own regulatory barriers. So that sort of became the focus coming out of the needs assessment and trying to understand, so who is well served by the housing stock in this community today, and who is not. And what we found, I think not really surprisingly, is that lower moderate income workers in Plymouth really can't necessarily afford to find housing here. They can't find something they can afford. There were also issues around, what I would call traveling employees, such as nurses who come for a certain stint at the hospital and then go on to another facility, which is really sort of the way a lot of nursing staff is happening in outlying hospitals in rural areas. We heard a lot about rising housing costs as well as taxes. We heard people say, I wish I had more choice. I wish I had more choices or opportunities for different types of housing in the community. We have infrastructure capacity limitations here. So how do we take advantage of the places in Plymouth that do actually have infrastructure to support growth? And there was, of course, a tremendous interest here, as there is in every community we work in, to try to maintain Plymouth's character. I always like to ask people, how do you define character? Because not everybody necessarily agrees. And we're not going to go too far afield about that tonight, but it's a challenge in every town. And then really focusing on what are the regulatory barriers that we can actually try to address as a community. So that's the one thing, and that's sort of making housing development difficult that we actually have some control over as a town. So coming out of the audit that was done following the needs assessment, we said, your zoning is really unclear. You have a lot of places in your zoning that just are really hard to understand. So making your regulations clear and consistent is something that needs to happen here. This town, like a lot of communities, over time, in an attempt to try to slow down growth, actually started increasing lot sizes. And so what we found when we mapped your community was a heck of a lot of this town had been made non-conforming by changes that had been adopted over time. So if you live in a house or if you have a business that's non-conforming because lot areas changed, it actually makes it harder for you to do certain things with your property. So thinking about, can you just roll this back and at least bring the lot area that you requirements that you have in line with the development pattern that already exists here? Because really what you're asking for in your zoning is inconsistent with the town's established development pattern. So that was another recommendation. We suggested that the town think about adopting an inclusionary zoning to create affordable housing. In New Hampshire, the really only way to do that is to create a basis for incentives for developers to create affordable housing. But it can be done, and there are communities in New Hampshire that have that. Trying to find character, trying to find the purpose statements, purposes of your districts, thinking about allowing some sort of soft approach to multifamily housing in your residential neighborhoods, what I call the 1 to 4s. So the 1 to 4 unit building is typically a homeowner occupied product where someone lives in the building, then has some rental units up to 3. And that 1 to 4 product is something that is eligible for homeownership financing. So it's not true multifamily. You might think of it as townhouse type building or a row house or something, but there's room to kind of introduce that sort of housing stock in your residential neighborhoods, and it's going to feel kind of more like a single family home than a traditional multifamily building. And then thinking about your parking standards, my gosh, your parking standards here in the wild. And I kind of know why, because people tell us, you can't find parking in downtown Plymouth. I have to tell you, every time I come here, I find a place to park. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the angels walking over me or something, but the parking standards here need help. So we made a bunch of recommendations coming out of the audit. And then we got into the drafting process for amendments. And so what I think many in the room may be familiar with, and if not, I'll just summarize for you. We looked at some new terms and tried to clean up definitions in the existing zoning ordinance. We created this new use called single-family attached, which is that 1 to 4 model that I talked about. It's 1 to 4s. Some people call it missing middle housing. We looked at dimensional regulations and tried to reform those back to the development pattern that exists in a lot of your neighborhoods to make it a little bit easier for people to perhaps develop at an incremental scale, incremental basis, additional housing in your community. We looked at parking reform. People were not hungry to reform parking here. We kind of worked around the edges a little bit, but did make some changes. And at the very least, sort of made it clear that if somebody wanted to do, more parking than the ordinance requires, that they had to kind of go through a bit of a hurry to do that. and then holding off, because that was the planning board's choice, on some more significant reforms in zoning that were just not, people were not comfortable and ready to go forward with them, which is kind of what you're then dealing with this year. We also looked at the town's subdivision regulations. We thought, you have a really strange cluster ordinance in this town. You can actually not use your zoning much to fix this, but focus more on how you use subdivision regulations to create what we call a cluster, which is a way simply of having multiple structures on a single lot that might share wastewater facilities and so forth. But the advantage you have in that type of development approach is that it makes it a little bit easier to design the project without worrying about lot lines and then save more open space. So that reform did actually, for the most part, go forward with the planning board. If you looked at reducing the sort of minimum acreage requirement for clusters, so we would do very small ones. We looked at reforming the formula for how many units you could do. There's a density bonus provision for various types of public benefits, be it open space or agricultural restrictions and so forth. And then even an opportunity to do some limited commercial uses on the neighborhood scale and larger cluster or planned development type of project. That leads us to where we are now. The whole bunch of zoning changes were approved by your community, which was wonderful. I mean, the track record for the town on that town meeting was fabulous. But now we have these two sort of bigger pieces that are in front of you this year. One involves an overlay district for 10 Brown, and some really interesting provisions in it around planned developments and mixed-use development and so forth. The development truly of a recreational, year-round recreational facility. And then following back on a recommendation that was in the 2018 master plan to look at some possibilities for modest densification, if you will, some additional housing types in the Fairgrounds Road area where you have sewer capacity. And this was the point where, kind of in this meeting, we thought we'd stop for a minute and just give the planning board a chance to answer any questions people may have about those provisions. It's already been a public hearing. It's going forward to town meeting, but if people have questions, we can take a few minutes to try to field them.
Does anyone have a question to any of these two overlay districts? What happened is, questions ready?
Everybody gets it? Whoa, call friends and Molly.
Perfect.
A lot of Mark. What?
One distinct thing I'll point out, which is just like a 30,000 foot view, these overlay districts, is you still have the right of your current zoning. So, for example, we'll take Tennon overlay district. All of that overlay district lays in the ag zone. So, if you like the ag zone or don't meet the minimum requirements to use the overlay district, all the ag zone zoning still applies. With the overlay district for Tenny Mountain, once you get up to 100 acres, you can start looking at what potential benefits you can use for that overlay district, which includes like higher density. And pretty much, excuse me, if someone were to choose to use the overlay district guidelines, that's what they're going to stick to. So you can't sort of do something with one, then go back to the ag zone because there's zoning that's more, conducive to your goals over there, go back and forth. It's one or the other. And same with the Fairgrounds Road District overlay. What that sort of duplicates, it doesn't really have the 100-acre minimum that Tenny Mountain does to start getting those real large densities. What it sort of mimics is more the setbacks that you see in downtown. There's the single-family residential zone, not necessarily downtown, but so one of the big things you see with the Fairgrounds Road District is smaller setbacks. So you can get houses and dwellings in tighter places and achieving more acreage density. So that's sort of like the...
I think that's a really good way to explain that. I mean, Fairgrounds Road is really around neighborhood scale development. Mm-hmm. And Tenny Mountain is more around master plan type of approaches to larger, larger tracts.
Yeah, and the master plan point is still part of that. Because with the Tenny Mountain overlay district, thank you for mentioning that,
It's okay.
Someone needs to bring, say they have 100 acres and they choose to use the Tenny Mountain District overlay zoning. They have to bring their entire plan in front of the planning board first. So the whole idea behind it is things aren't piecemeal together throughout the decades. This is our entire plan for this tract of land. It might be 12 phases long, but this is where we plan on ending up. So that's, you could say, is one of the benefits of doing something like that with the Tenny Mountain Overlay District area, is that the town gets to see what the developer is envisioning in the long run, versus us getting someone bringing to the planning board phase one, and we say, oh, we like phase one, and they say, all right, here's phase two. We're like, we sort of like phase two, but we did phase one, it's okay. It's like, hey, here's phase three. It's like, holy smokes, this is not what we sort of envisioned. Like, so it sort of lays it out.
Yeah.
Gets them on the table.
Yeah.
If I could just add,
Which,
if you're looking for more information, there's also a video available.
are they available now?
Are they available yet?
They were recorded. Okay, they're
They
recorded.
recorded. I don't know if I can finish and publish.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
The clock's ticking.
They know.
And you can also read the full language on the town website, or talk to town staff, Joseph and Avery Boardman.
Yep, so on Pebby Baker TV on YouTube, the Pebby Baker TV channel, will have published at some point here soon the reading of each amendment, if you will, that Molly and John did. Any other questions at the moment? All right, great. Thank you.
All right. Your turn. John Charles is up. Thank you.
Great. So you've just heard from Judy on some of the different initiatives that Plymouth has been doing to look into housing and zoning. We also just wanted to take this opportunity to show you, looking a few years ahead, like what other things are happening. So first, we want to point out that there's a design workshop charrette happening later in May, May 30th and 31st. This is a collaboration with the town of Plymouth and Plan New Hampshire. So it's an exciting opportunity to kind of get a different perspective on planning in this particular part of town. We also want to highlight, there will be some plans that will be renewing in the coming years. The current master plan for Plymouth was in 2018, so in the near future there'll be a new plan. And then also kind of taking a zoom out at the regional scale, the Lakes Regional Planning Commission will be doing a new housing assessment and a new master plan as well. So it's an exciting time to do planning in this area, and you can think of this housing chapter as kind of being a bridge between the work that's happening now and the things to come. Now we're here to talk about the housing chapter. Here's a brief timeline of what this project will entail. So we started this project back in August with 6-word story activities. Some of you might have participated, just to get a sense of, when you think about home, what are the qualities that you envision and what's important for you? Now we're at the March community meeting happening today. From there, we'll be doing community interviews with different members of the community to get different insights about, what's important for housing in Plymouth, what should we be thinking about. And then from March to April to June, we'll be meeting with the planning board, refining, our insights, and working on a draft housing chapter that we can present to the town. To talk about the 6-word story, like I said, we asked members of the community, what does home mean to you? And we posted this in 4 different locations around town, at the library, at the senior center, the town hall, and recycling center. We got up to 131 responses, so lots of different ideas there. And we just wanted to highlight some themes that we heard. So we saw, people talking about affordability, about their family, about the sense of community and belonging that they have to Plymouth. Some people were newcomers to Plymouth, so they were also talking about, discovering this community. And then, things like nature, faith, safety were also things that came up in some of the responses.
Yep.
So now we can move on to the next section of this meeting, which is just to have a group discussion. Before we begin, I'll just share some norms with everyone. So please share your name before speaking. Be respectful when others are speaking. Give others a chance to contribute. And after you leave, think about what you learned from your peers, not necessarily personal stories. You might not get closure from these conversations, but these are ongoing ideas that will be part of the housing chapter. And so I think we are going to be doing one large group now. So, yeah, it's awesome.
Okay, I'm Molly McCann. I'm a member of your planning board. I volunteered to facilitate this fairly, somewhat large group discussion. So again, keep in mind the discussion norms, and I'm comfortable with, if you want to raise your hand, I can indicate you. If you want to just speak up, you can feel free to speak up, but don't talk over it as much as possible, please. So the first question we have for you what are Plymouth's housing strengths? What do you think are Plymouth's housing strengths?
And we just had this slide there also in the.
Oh, okay, here we go. Bill.
I'd like to offer that one of the things that drew me into town is that a large portion of the downtown area is very walkable. So, it's easy to when you do walk from your home to Main Street, dinner, entertainment. But I guess it's on specific housing, but it's like the nature of the neighborhoods.
And what I'd say the neighborhoods are a strength. I would look at the neighborhoods, and it was all being able to have your children meet other children and the community, wherever you go. I think that's important. And I think when you've been on campus or on campus, they all tend to have our neighborhoods. So neighborhood sounds like is connected to relationship to neighbors. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
If by the way, I feel like to scan the Barrett Planning Group, I'm going to be just taking the notes. If you see that I don't capture something that you are conveying, just stop me and just, you can correct me that out. But we'll be sharing the notes after the meeting as well. So one of the things like housing trends is there is a lot of available housing for students and colleges that we see in Highland Places. There is a lot of housing shortages for students. But England has a good number of options when it comes to like student-owned housing, whatever on campus or off campus.
If you want me to be asking people the names,
You know,
you can.
oh, yeah, also like I lived through the first sermon. If you don't mind just saying your name.
I'm sorry, I did not give you the proper instructions. Will you please share your name? Tree Scott. Tree Scott.
I'm Vicky.
Vicky. Thank you. Phil Lonorell, the first one.
It's A-OK.
Okay. Okay.
I would add on the walkability, accessibility to trails from the downtown area that taking out into the woods is a strength that Plymouth has. And then also, it seems silly to say, but like interstate access is probably the quality that we have.
To the interstate.
Yes, to the to travel corridors in general, but yes, the interstate.
Should we be focusing more on housing specifically, or is neighborhood dynamics a
So-
preference discussion?
You asked such a good question because I'm listening to this and thinking this is part of the discussion that provides that connection between housing and the land use purpose, the raison d'etre of a master plan. So I think you should just go ahead and keep talking, and if we feel like we're not hearing something that we should hear, we'll jump in. I think privacy, like there's a lot of street cover, you want to find a lot of like open spaces with like parking lots. That's a really nice way to like get together.
And what's your name?
Ashley.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, you said privacy, tree cover, and I thought you said something about parking lots. That
We just don't have a lot of community parking.
for real services.
But
I'm sorry.
permeable surface. Yeah.
I would say that from more of a housing aspect, I would say we have a fairly wide variety of housing ages. So there's some really old homes, several hundred years old, and there's some they're going to be built. So I would say it's not. I've been in other parts of the country where 90% of the homes were built after World War II. And then, we have a nice mix. If people are interested in older homes and historic homes, there are many of those around. But there's also, for those of us who lived in old homes, there's more. You search mountain.
I must say range of housing sizes. We started with the family, the mounted bedroom. When some of the big ones.
May I make a comment?
As of course,
Of
As
course.
also a citizen.
On the planning board, yes, by all means.
I'm thinking also about architectural style. I'm not sure if this is a strength. If this is coming up. I think we have a range, but also a cohesiveness. Maybe I'm actually feeling this is both a strength and a weakness. Like we have a cohesiveness, and yet we also have a lot of inconsistencies of style. And I think that connects to this idea of character. So I went off my own goals here for a second. Any other strengths that anyone wants to?
What was your name?
Well,
I think that the Main Street apartments, those businesses of Main Street, the strength.
apartments, a bunch of businesses on Main Street, a mixed use on Main Street.
Probably helps with affordability.
The demographics of our housing stock, not necessarily the housing itself, but from age-wise demographics, there was quite a mix in Plymouth.
Do you mean housing agents? Or, okay.
In my following them.
I would just add to the, what we've heard already about walkability. Houses close together, houses close to downtown, houses close to the hospital. I can go several days and update it in calling. I can just go to shops or the entertain downtown. If I do have a medical emergency, I can walk to the hospital. Unless I can't, but like, I have in the past. And I really appreciate that.
Okay. And
So we are ready to move on to the second question, which are,
Can I add one?
yeah,
I think the public resources offered by the college campus provides recreational activities to people now looking around and think about how many people in here I bet you guys
oh, interesting.
at the what was that ice arena?
at the ice arena. That just recreational events there.
Different town?
A different town.
Different town.
Wilderness.
But it's available to our town.
It is. That's true.
It is across the river.
That is true.
I'd like to make a correction, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't mean the range of actually houses, I meant the range of the people living.
Living in.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just for clarification.
Yes.
Thank you. Range of residency. So,
Age demographics of the town. Yeah. Will Alexis catch on? Right.
So, what are Plymouth's housing weaknesses? What are Plymouth's housing weaknesses?
Age, cost.
everything.
Go for it.
There's a lot.
Yeah, let's.
Keep the list going.
So the age of the building.
Ages of the buildings, the older ones downtown. So it makes upkeep obviously a challenge.
Cost of maintaining them, the limit on them. Yep.
Yep.
I think he says something about infrastructure too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an inexpensive place to have water pumped in and your number 1 and number 2 pumped out. Sorry.
Yes, you're so water and sewer.
Yeah, well, how did just say affordability?
Yeah, affordability.
Overall affordability now, it's just gone up so much
Across the board.
across the board for students, for residents, for anybody. Okay. Facets,
Taxes. Tied into the affordability question.
Insurance.
Insurance costs.
also seeing types, like I'm wondering about senior housing. I know we have the one, we have like some Prince Haven and but I don't see, what it's time for people to downsize, whether there's space for them to stay at point to do that.
Yeah, there's the
The development over in Crescent seems to be in it's an over 55 seniors.
Okay, so yeah, then you go down that one's.
that's the only other one I know.
Right, and as I say, I'm thinking if we had more kind of senior housing available, then there would be, older people could move out of their bigger homes and younger people could do it in some housing stock available for those people with, starting their families. But I think that's limited right now too. They can't afford it.
It's interesting you bring that up because I'm thinking about so many older people I know who moved down to Concord. And spent these there, they leave Plymouth.
Right. Well, they're developing all these places where activities, things like that. Yeah. But then,
Can I just come to a clarifying question? So for the limited options for downsizing, is that more a factor of cost, like the options that exist are very expensive, or is it just not?
it's on campus. I mean, that I know. I mean, these kind of communities that people want to buy. But I know that there's a shortage of housing for young people with young families to move into, and so that's and that older people are hanging on because they don't have any place to go. So there's a bit of a purpose-built senior housing. Yeah. And yeah.
And so, John, I would add to that I think it's not just students. I think a lot of people today would appreciate smaller homes that are hard to find. There are young families, and families are smaller than they used to be on average. People just aren't having as many kids, and you can get by with a smaller house and less pay. And there are other people fresh out of college or what have you who just aren't moving out of their homes for a long time because there's really nothing to move into that's affordable or even like sized correctly. And so I think those smaller homes are beneficial to a lot of demographics in addition to seniors.
Wages, local wages, from lack thereof.
Local wages being mismatched with costs.
Yeah, so I think one of the conversations that is missed a lot, it's, do you want cheaper housing? Yes, no one's ever said no to that. We don't, but we also don't often have the conversation historically about wages. I mean, everyone wants something for cheaper, but also how can we help increase the wages so people can afford more for themselves?
So when you update your master plan, you probably going to want to make sure that in addition to land use update, that you probably want to have a component on economic development.
And we're with heavy.
But I mean, in terms of actually, housing that in your master plan, probably be a really good idea.
Doubt it.
I would say that one of the, it seems obvious to us now, but I would say one of the factors that affects cost here is that when winters are cold, our road surfaces degrade more rapidly than more temperate climates, and there's a cost to all of us to maintain roads. That is part of it. The cost, part of our tax impact is that, the road maintenance costs are high because of the severe cold, probably exacerbated by the excessive use of salts. It increases the number of freeze-thaw cycles. It drives frost heaver, the ground makes the frost bigger. All of the above. I think that it's a measurable cost.
Actually, this is maybe an opportunity, I don't know. But the resiliency of our communities, I'm thinking about what Phil's saying, but as climate is changing, the weather is just going to get worse, and like, are our homes actually ready for that? So maybe that's a possibility.
I think there are limitations and weaknesses in our rental markets. I think we have lots of student rentals. We have some seasonal rentals, and the just regular rentals are fairly limited. When I moved to this town, I was going to rent for a while, and there was just like nothing to be had that's a reason in that, and that could fit like a family week here
Yeah, family or young professional.
or a young professional. And it was really like we saw student rentals and we saw like vacation homes, and it was very little in between. And I mean, there's a part of me, if I could afford it, I would love a stamp rental and not build a house, because for the headaches of like a house sometimes. But that opportunity really isn't there.
Sam.
One thing I think that we don't have is like condo developments that open up sort of that way market purchase thing. And I think it's kind of a range for the 6-unit facts. And if anything, like in the communities, you see larger condo developers that they bring sort of entry-level buys. I'm so glad someone brought that up. And I didn't have to say it.
I will say, my understanding is that the Blueberry Hill units, they're highly desirable. They sell quickly, usually word of mouth when they become available, and that that development had originally been scaled to be much larger, and the developer kind of built in the first phase and kind of bailed on the rest of it. But that had also, in fact, there had been a plan for more of those units.
They start a home and building every 6. That's like,
Yeah.
I was going to say, our definition of density, I think, be changed and improved to have a more effective measurability and applicability. Because the 6-unit map, I've always been confused about that. And I feel like it's a really silly definition to continue trying to use in for day and age.
I also feel like, however the development went in the 80s and 90s, there's a lack of cohesive agreement and organization about what space is used for what, and therefore a lack of continuity of open space and available and accessible space for shared community usage, as well as agreement about what types of buildings go best where based on the landscape, and how that could be better served to develop relationships and a diversity of where people want to. Some people don't want to live, I think, near other people in this town. I think a lot of people want to not see anybody else, which, deserves, I think, just as much respect as people who do want to live in higher density. So how do you honor those two types of desires while also creating a shared and agreed upon vision for how space is used within the town?
Can you illustrate an example of what you're talking about with the,
For example, it would be really wonderful if there were near public open spaces for walking, for biking, or bike paths, or accessible recreation, but if you have houses or other buildings that are built in a non-cohesively organized way, you don't have enough continual open space to do that.
it's fragmented?
It's fragmented, or you have lots of different types of mini projects taking up awkward cul-de-sac space rather than having kind of what we're going for in the Tenny Overlay District, a more agreed upon plan that fits a lot of different needs, but in a way that maximizes its benefit for the entire community.
I also agree with that. It looks like they start little projects like the one that you're looking at revisiting, where there was like a launch of an amphitheater that about a significant for the and if you look at it and you think, who thought this was a good way to do it. It's a great idea, but the execution, what's not typical.
Meaning amphitheater?
Or they can make that specific river access.
I think having a river that is seen. The one thing I noticed about a lot of towns in America are houses are always faced away from the waterways. Or in American cities, everything is away from the water. And in other places, when you have housing and infrastructure that focuses on the waterways and makes the waterways a part of visual beauty and feature, there's accessibility. I think it changes how the town is arranged.
And that's slow to change. The rivers used to be our sewers.
Yeah.
So people,
Energy source.
so people didn't want to face them. And that's slow to change that infrastructure ground question. Yeah.
In Plymouth, that's also, floodplain is very wide.
Yeah, right,
So
absolutely.
it's a matter of the floodplain.
I think that ties into Ashley's comment about
Yeah.
the climate and
Yeah.
like you said,
Clear.
flooding is a real consideration.
About, which is why a lot of people squawk.
Yeah.
I was just going to add some slight contextual stuff, like it's when you are not a student landlord, you can call something student housing, but when you are a student landlord, you have to abide by the Fair Housing Act and like not recognize that there is a separate class of rentals known as student rentals.
Right.
So then you get into this coded language, people saying things are young professionals and things like that, something like implying that somehow houses on Russell Street are unworthy of people who are a young professional. So I think we got to find new ways to talk about these things, because obviously there's, with the college shrinking, there's going to be a need to do something with the old houses in towns that are multi-family that house a lot of college students. And I would, it's easy to sort of look down, particularly I think if you went to Plymouth State and used to party in these places, it's probably easy to look down on things. But I think if you go to Bristol, to Rochester, to Laconia, to Franklin, you find housing that is really not all that different than what we would consider student housing here at Plymouth.
Sure.
And there are families or young professionals or whoever living in those types of.
But yeah, if I can add to that,
Yeah.
I was both a little targeted, but I do totally agree with what you're
I
saying.
agree with what you said, just so you know.
And I think there's tremendous opportunity in those buildings. And I also think to accommodate different demographics going in, I think a lot of them have been redesigned and such in the interior to be hard to accommodate a non-student population. Not all of them, in some cases.
Meaning like something really individualized private spaces versus a space that is like for more shared space.
Too many bedrooms and not enough living rooms.
Too many bedrooms, not enough living room. I remember at a couple I've seen some really weird cut through bathrooms and stuff.
Sure. And don't you find that in the rental stock in lots of New Hampshire towns that don't have the student density that we.
But I do. There were lots of names of buildings.
For the advent of plumbing and squeeze bathrooms in, even in old.
And this is a place where you don't, there's a lot of Yankee ingenuity, and there's you don't even have to disclose that you did all your own electrical work when you go to site. So New Hampshire has these quirks, and that's not just Plymouth. That's those things are at.
I think that leads well into what are the housing opportunities that exist in Plymouth.
I think.
Can I echo one more because
Yeah.
So I think one challenge in creating housing throughout New Hampshire is that we're a state with a lot of wetlands and a lot of shallow soils, and most of the easily developed land has already been developed. Meaning that anything additional development is usually expensive in terms of putting a foundation on, shallow soils, rock outcrops, trying to find drainage, or working around significant wetlands to find small islands of buildable land. This is not North Carolina where there's acres of sand where developers can go in and lay out a subdivision and put a house every 100 feet. It's a challenge to find a building lot where you can put a house with well and septic thinking this publicly.
So those areas that have that wonderful sandy soil have a different problem. And that is the ease with which wastewater reaches the water table. So there are other kinds of development constraints in service.
But I mean, if they have water, sewer, control, that's
Because a lot of them don't.
okay. Depends. Good point.
Just two different kind of house.
Yeah. So in poverty, it's somewhat unique in Montreal and
So what housing opportunities exist in Plymouth? Sounds like student, non-student, multifamily housing.
and then again, the resetter, and I think at some level where graduated care for seniors would be an opportunity.
I'd really like to see housing that generates its own energy and maybe even
So that's out.
do like neighborhoods. Agri neighborhoods?
What people actually?
Shaky.
Didn't put it. Still not yet.
But
Not quite to the level of agri neighborhoods, but just more efficient housing. Because with the mix of housing stock we have in Plymouth, I think a lot of them we find, even from the 80s to the 90s, but they're not as efficient as what we can build today. So just more efficient housing.
Okay.
Just but in reference to the that current STEAM housing that we have on Boston Street, just don't forget where
I know.
it used to be big old houses, you know, for single family, and I think they could be easily restructured if the population goes down so much. I could imagine, you know, 3-family homes, whenever they're big enough for that, for smaller homes. What we heard when this came up in the Hot One process was the cost to try to reorganize those the interior of those buildings to make them more, I get, for lack of a better word, conventional rental opportunities. And I think one of the things the town would consider to take advantage of that potential opportunity is the community revitalization tax credit that New Hampshire has, which is an absolutely marvelous law, and it's been used in a number of communities here to deal with this kind of challenge. Like, how do you capitalize those projects in a way that makes them feasible? So that's sort of something to be thinking about, is sort of an opportunity here as you continue to see that demand for off-campus housing perhaps diminish. How do you then revitalize those properties and make them more available for a different rental market?
Good.
I think Clip has a lot of opportunities for energy efficient housing, such as installing solar panels or geothermal energy. And we are in a really good climate for that. The snow isn't really an issue when it comes to solar panels, which is like about top. And I know Plymouth State University already has 2 buildings that operate off solar panels, and there is several geothermal energy like systems across campus. And buildings on countries, and you know, energy prices are going up in the state. Brendan, say your name, please.
Yeah, I'm Brendan. I had two things for opportunities. I think the first one, which I think we danced around a little bit, but it's really putting a plug in for missing middle housing. I think that at least duplexes by right everywhere, but possibly triplexes and quadplexes, most construction or influence would go for a lot higher. And then the second thing is I think we can increase the height maximums downtown if you've got for more multi-family. Yeah, downtown. I think our downtown's real kind of utilized for
And
So the town started down that path of missing middle, and just the anxiety about actually saying 1 to 4 is always okay. You know, we weren't quite ready. You weren't quite ready to say, why can't we just do this in our residential neighborhoods? But I think that opportunity exists because it's in your zoning now. It's just not available where it really needs to be.
Yeah. And to add to that, Judy, I know you probably know this already, but missing middle housing is really what's going to stabilize the taxes as well. So more so than, say, adding more single family homes. So for missing middle, there's also for those who, care a lot about taxes and stop missing middle, it really helps stabilize a lot of that as well.
Are you willing to illustrate more about how it would help?
the last time.
Different demographics.
Different demographics, yeah. And it's,
I'd say it would let some of the students that graduate, maybe if that opportunity, say to them. And then, Joe?
I was gonna say, Brendan, you have read my mind on a lot of these. Allowing certainly duplexes by right everywhere would be a great start. And it's really, how much different is that anyway than we already allow ADUs? And then we just definitely start from there, thinking triplexes or quads or whatever. And in addition to the tax benefits of that, there's also just creating a vibrant downtown, or increasing the vibrancy of our downtown by having more people there, especially as families and households get smaller. To actually have more people in our kind of core downtown area, it would be fantastic for business opportunities as well. And yeah, we really, I don't know how. We've talked about a lot of different ways, but somehow getting our head around multifamily and the 6-unit limit. There's opportunities downtown for larger buildings. And we have a whole bunch of these regulations for town-wide, like 6 units for multifamily, 35 feet for height, and why that's not like more tailored neighborhoods is a little bit puzzling sometimes.
Can I ask you, I think that little explanation about where the 6-unit thing comes from might be helpful to people. It's basically Plymouth's defense against, being seen as exclusionary. So under the state's workforce housing law, you're kind of assumed to provide for housing opportunities in your community if you allow blah, 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 and multifamily up to 6 units. So this sort of 6-unit thing, actually, it comes out of the statutes, and some communities have latched onto it to say, well, if we do this, that's sort of our defense against having a hostile affordable housing development thrown at us. But what actually it does is it creates an ugly building. I just to be honest, it's like a multifamily needs a different form.
And this has been one of the concerns, like, what does a multifamily building do to the character of the town? And there are some really ugly multifamily buildings out there. And the question then becomes, well, how do you actually write the zoning in a way that facilitates something more along the lines of what we'd like? And that's complex, but there are ways of doing it. And I think we should, really try to work with that.
They just had a bunch of issues. So some of these things are talking about like duplex or triplex for like revitalizing the houses on like sofas and speed lighting, making on the baby context or condo. I'm just thinking like Portsmouth. A lot of the buildings that used to just be those in apartments, they were able to break those all up and sell them off.
I mean, there's no reason they can't if a developer didn't have the wherewithal to do it. And I think what Judy was talking about with the 79E incentive, which basically puts a freeze on the tax rate for a period of time while you invest in those properties, raise their value, and eventually recoup that. But as an incentive to do that, you just freeze the taxes for 6, 8, 10 years. I think it's into this
Depends on what the decides.
for a period of time, up to as an incentive to do that.
Under the old holds there, it's not that.
We'd have to adopt 79E.
Right. But as, by the time that that the payment period ends, you've got property that's a much higher value than it was when it started. So it's sort of an investment as a community in growing a tax base. We're largely by working with the stock that you have and how to improve it.
And in the meantime, you're not losing anything that you'd be at the same tax rate anyway.
That's right. Well,
I'd say we also have some existing buildings that are prohibited to be utilized more efficiently because of our 6 units per building. And then there's some good examples of non-conforming buildings that existed prior to that limit of 6 that seem to fit perfectly into our community. So that's an excellent example. And like the apartments over buildings on Main Street, there are a couple with 8 apartments and nothing a single building with their
safe to work as well out there.
I think we should move to our final questions or semi-final, essentially. What housing challenges does Plymouth, which seems like we touched on some of those in the weaknesses. So we could reiterate some of them. Charity infrastructure to support this housing development. To avoid the water mains burst year over year. And makes full sense. Please. Available space for Stillman.
And like in the vein of space, it's like you want to balance like, not looking at the mountain and just seeing a swath of houses, one of these of the nature. So it's like balancing that the natural character, that we want.
And I guess one of the things we've heard, not so much tonight, interestingly, but in COP 1 when we were doing research, is that a lot of us wanted affordable housing and we didn't want to give up detached single household housing as our model of housing. And there's a kind of mismatch there. And that's both art and sport for a lot of people. And I'm delighted to hear what a lot of flexibilities in this room debate. Down, but in other conversations I haven't heard some flexibility, and that can be a challenge.
So kind of mentioning what you're saying, connecting it to what Ashley said earlier about creating more communities that grow food together and stuff like that, and thinking of single family homes that maybe don't want to become multi-family homes, but could be cluster units of those single families, and then co-oping like that for rental pricing and everything. Like I actually currently renting from someone who has kind of cluster housing and on their properties, and so we benefit from that kind of communal spacing, but our own private quarters. So that was the goal for the reform of the cluster bylaw, cluster ordinance. I think with a few more tweaks to that work that was done, you'd be get closer to, I think, what you're talking about. There were some limitations to that revision process, but I think taking it the rest of the way, we're doing a lot.
And we also allowed for residential buildings on a single lot.
Yes.
Which has already been used a couple of times now.
I know, which is great. Even more so with the actual college housing that could be changed into multi-families or co-op housing. There's so much space between those units that could be community gardens and create the same cluster, but not significant and family.
Do you mind if I do number 5? Cut off or okay.
Go right ahead.
Vicky, did you want to say?
Oh no, I was just gonna say cost of energy is steadily increasing, and not just but for all nature.
And as Nick was saying, it is a challenge. Electric, water, sewer, these are not cheap utilities in the I mean, I remember talking to my father at some point about his house, and he's filling his pool up and everything. Yeah. And he's like, oh, I pay whatever, $20 a month or whatever for water. And I'm like, if that, but I can't even imagine. I get a glass of water, it costs me $10.
So I just think this is an important question. It's that they really did, but I'd like to ask this group. What do you think should be Plymouth's goals for housing? What should be Plymouth's goals for housing?
One thing is for sustainability, just not trying to repurpose before just creating new things.
Repurpose.
Barrel. So do you mean like reuse of existing
Yeah,
buildings?
to focus on the reorganizing existing
Yeah.
structures rather than just starting from scratch, just because it's easier.
Or looking at ways to do infill between existing development as opposed
Yes,
to. Okay.
absolutely.
To have sufficient and affordable housing for a local workforce.
Also, we need to, for an infill, built for the future, that really looked for resiliency, and by bit resiliency, it's fine.
Yes. It's important for us to be inclusive so that everybody, we have something available, any kind of group, demographic group that wants to live here. Sorry.
Inclusive of a wide,
Inclusive, older people, younger people, people with families, younger graduates, students,
whatever you want to call it.
aspiring adults.
Vicky?
Continuity the demand for housing whilst protecting the rural and natural characteristics of housing.
And that talk about character.
Some help. Well,
One thing that might help with supporting like citizen housing is like transportation. But they, but they more than the towns together or regionally.
It's become way less bikeable also. There used to be bike racks downtown, and there aren't any. So I would assume that a lot of the housing goes infrastructure we're moving between houses.
Yeah, that brings up a, do you mind?
Go.
I feel like we used to have trash cans downtown. You know why we don't have trash cans downtown?
No.
Because the apartments up above all the buildings started using it for their household trash.
Oh no.
So it produces unique challenges.
Yeah.
I remember the bike rack section. I forgot about it.
Or like
Yeah.
nothing with firewood, having up to us just like a face. Like we're not that nothing except downtown, but it's everywhere. Yeah. Vicky.
Like modernity having that fits accessibility standards to help people that aren't able or like really people that might not have full like a bodily capacity that we fun.
I feel like that ties into accessibility of the town, isn't
The good,
our sidewalks are challenging.
the full.
Some are perfect.
Senator curb cuts are challenging.
Good. Good. Silent in the high.
Does housing also incorporate like shared public space? Like I think
Yes.
our is an amazing asset within this town, and the number of families that utilize that playground, and it's huge. And so I wonder about even the common downtown. I think people do use it, but having more places where residents can gather would be nice.
speak about accessibility, the crosswalk going to Fox Park. Hill.
Oh my god.
It's absolutely ideal.
It's great, yeah.
Hey,
Since like President House Gardens, everybody put that in. Well, it's 7:45.
I'm going to suggest a slight variation in the agenda because I get through. Because listening to this discussion just bombarded me.
he doesn't.
Part of me will like flip through a bunch of slides. That's your vision statement from the 2018 plan. And you know what strikes me is how much the different things that you guys just talked about are very consistent in delivering on this vision.
Good art to change.
You know, I don't know that you do, but I just want to point out to you that, a lot of thought went into that vision statement. And a lot of the things you just talked about are really like, how do you now through a housing lens, advance some of these concepts? So there's a lot to work with the planning board in terms of a housing component of the master plan. It's good. I don't think we need to do a report out because you were all together. So I kind of know what was said. So I actually think once again, it's like we should all on the slides. Pardon me for doing this because I'm sure this is driving you crazy back there. Next steps.
Can I ask one thing?
Of course.
There are a couple people who contributed regularly and a couple of people who are politely quiet, and I'm curious to know, like, do you have any thoughts you haven't shared? Jeff, do you have any thoughts you haven't shared?
I got a million thoughts on that. I didn't open up the student housing in the worth.
No, that's okay. I see a couple faces who hasn't. I'm just kind of curious. Like,
Well,
I wanna-
my name is Jeff. I manage a majority of the student housing
Yep.
there in town. It's interesting to hear your comments, and I will tell you the biggest challenge of our company now that's done student rentals for now over 40 years. No, I am 100% student rentals setup.
Yep.
To change them, yes, cost will be huge. On top of all the costs that we've already put into it, plus going through all the approvals through all the boards. So my challenge every single year is not knowing what the university is doing and not doing, as probably no one in this room knows what they're doing and not doing. So if I have a 6-unit apartment building, do I want to put 3 apartments of students and 3 apartments of families in it? No, I can't. It's out there to either group to do that and a management nightmare for myself. The proximate, like how close all my buildings are together, again, same problem. Am I going to fill 18 Russell with families and 20 Russell with students? Can you imagine what our police department would be like, what my phone would be like? So those are some very, very big challenges. And we all cringe and us landlords talk about what PSU is going to do for the next year. Are they going to keep seniors on campus? If that happens, that's going to be a serious problem for us student off-campus areas.
Right.
A lot of the landlords, they've already tried to do year-round rentals and other rentals, and it's a very, very difficult management. It's different. I'm going to say this in this room. My student rentals are 100% easier for me than any year-round rentals I've ever had.
So no, I can believe that.
And I sold all mine. And my year-round ones are gone, and it's very much on bricks. I can deal 100% with my students all day long, and they've been great. And it's an easier management. So if that changes, I can put 50 apartments out there that would go back to family rentals, and what's that going to do to where we're sitting in school?
What's like the top 3 things that make the year round difficult?
Yeah.
Compared to this, you're saying the students are easier than year round. So I'm just what is it that makes you
Well, I built addition of apartment. By part, you need student. And I'm speaking for minute ways. Okay, I'm not. You guys know the problem houses. You all know I don't deal with problem houses. Okay, we have nice units. Everyone knows that. You can see them. So I don't deal with the student problems. The other ones that go year round. Talk to your maintenance guys. It's not a fun time for them. Rent collection is easier, way easier. You can pay your water and sewer bill. You can pay your taxes easier. It's so much easier for management. Student rentals in 9 months, they leave in May, and guess what? I have 3 or 4 months to go through and do what I need to do in each apartment for August to come back, and every year I can keep doing improvement to keep the apartments as best as I can. So it's a very, very different management. And for me, I'll say this for me because I've been doing it for a long time, it is an easier management for the students and makes the year round. But to change that, and like I said, to bring all these families coming in, and it's already happening. It's already happening. Just like other people have changed and more family rentals, and that's kids in their school system. That's and they're talking. They're very.
You're talking about, so it's mostly rent collection, general maintenance of the property, and like what the condition of the property is at the end of the year, or if you have multiple years, people stay.
Right, yeah. Well, if I have a tenant, I've been there for 5 years, I'm not enough to be able to upgrade the back.
So I think the challenge for a municipality is how does the town make sure that it's not in the way if at whatever point you or your successors decide to do something different with those properties because the market that they intend for is gone for us. Yeah. How does the town not get in the way of allowing those properties to redevelop to whatever they're going to be. That's, I think, from a municipality, that's the question. So there is a land use piece of this, a zoning regulatory piece to it. I don't think the issue, I'm really glad you spoke up because I kind of.
You know, you're talking about Stu Rentals, and sometimes they, people, when they hear the Stu Rentals, it's like,
No, people have.
I get it.
It's part of town.
It is.
Why,
It is.
why doesn't, why couldn't that housing, help communities with landlords do that shift? Pardon me? Why couldn't we help them make that shift?
I think the question is, how does the town not make it impossible for them to go with ship for those property owners who choose to do that? That's the
79D would help, right?
79E is an option for those who want to do it. I think what I worry about for you is, as the college continues to perhaps require more people to live on campus because it's in their economic interest,
Right.
at some point you have to make decisions.
Right.
And I think for us as consultants, it's so how does the town create a realm for you to make those decisions and not be in the way and end up with properties that are vacant and not being used. So,
Yeah, we've experienced the highest vacancy rate we've had in 30 years in Spalding.
yeah.
So it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I'm selective. I will not take a leap that I don't like. So I'm selective in that's part of my own doing, but I won't just take something before them.
Yeah.
There's the more students living on campus, but there's also, like, one of the graphs showed the enrollment declining.
Correct, yeah, it's a tough, yeah, everything is bad there. The numbers are bad.
Number of grad students kind of fall.
Eventually, it'll have to be to undergraduates, and we'll have to make hard choice.
We're at the point where the university is talking about taking their own housing offline and making it into broader guns.
And but years ago, quite frankly, Merrill Place could have been built, but too late then.
Thank you.
That's,
I mean, it's an important perspective.
Dan, thanks.
Anybody else who didn't say something? Like, who's just dying to speak?
I can, yeah. My name's Ben. I was one of the first people to use the open space residential development thing that was passed last year. Just finished 2 duplex units on Texas Hill. They're full and
That's
it's going pretty good. So thank you for that.
I mean, the changes we made in the subdivision
Yeah.
provisions? That was working for you?
no, I think they're using the multiple residential.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah. All right. The increased density on the same.
Okay.
Split.
Okay.
But that's going good, and I am considering developing a little bit more in that area, and I just wanted to gauge interest, and haven't been to one of these things before. So.
You know what the biggest fear is for a consultant to write zoning? Is that you're going to write something that doesn't work. So when somebody says, hey, I tried this and I was able to do something with it, it's like you got. Any other comments? So next steps. You ready to go? You all ready to go into next steps?
Yeah.
Evan? So we have a housing chapter to write, and there isn't a, protocol for this, for sort of creating it. And we're working on that. This meeting is definitely part of the input for that. We will be presenting a draft of that to the planning board, and the intent is to have this finalized in June. It's going to be a combination of kind of a demographic overview, some of which you've already seen, but we're updating the data from the HOP 1 grant, looking at kind of how the community sees housing. And I have to tell you, I think there has been a shift here in the sort of the tenor of discussion that we heard at the beginning of early HOP 1 to now. But I can kind of understand why. So maybe looking at why perhaps some perceptions may be changing. And then trying to help connect the sort of housing vision and housing recommendations from a land use perspective with like what else is going on in the region. So you're not just an island, but looking at kind of what's happening around you and how do you sort of connect your plans and your vision for housing with the sort of regional context. So it's partially land use, it's partially demographics, partially you're part of a region. You're actually part of a couple of regions. And so how do you sort of make sense out of all that? For the planning board will, be able to consider that and hopefully, adopt it or give us input that you would like us to make changes, and we'll make the changes. But that is the plan. If you leave an email address on the sign-in sheet, we can make sure you're added to the project list. We have a list of, from top one that we can keep people informed about. There's also a page on the town website where there's a lot of information about what's going on with this housing chapter, and also the work that was previously done. So that is, I think, it.
Can I just add one?
Of course,
One thing,
absolutely.
as people are exiting, if you didn't get a chance on the board out there, it's helpful for us to get a sense of who is at the meeting. So we have just some stickers out there. If you just want to let us know kind of what your affiliation is with the community, put as many as apply to as possible. As Judy mentioned, there's also the sign-in sheets. We definitely want to have your emails so we can keep in touch. Lastly, I know we kind of discussed this as the group, but if there are thoughts that you didn't feel comfortable sharing or just didn't get to share, we do have a board you can drop some sticky notes on the way out. I have sticky notes over there, spread them over here. I'm going to put them over here too, so you're not the crowd. But it's just asking just 3 questions. What can this housing chapter do for Plymouth? What issues should it address? And then what goals or strategies, if you have really specific ideas for actions as well, you can add them to that board. So again, if you didn't get a chance to speak up, or if you just had something that came to mind, feel free to add that on your way out too. The difference between her age and mine is that she can read it from that distance, and I barely. But the most important thing would be your email address if you would like us to be able to update as we go.
Yeah, the stickies are really helpful, just so you know. It's not just like cute, it's actually very helpful to us as those comments we get. And so if you have a chance, that would be great.
Some just
The faculty can give us too.
Joseph, you can start clapping, 'cause that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, everyone. Planning board, we meet the first and third Thursday of every week, usually at the beginning of that week, Monday. You can go to the main landing page on the town website, click on the calendar Thursday, and we'll have our agenda right there for the public. So if you're ever like, hey, I wonder if they're talking about master plan stuff this week. Sometimes they're Friday, but usually by every Monday, our agenda is posted. Click on the agenda, join us in person via Zoom, or just watch us on YouTube on Penny Basic TV. Thank you. I'm sorry?
Are we down to one alternate on the planning board?
No.
No, we have to twin one. Joseph, update on all
We
of
were
this?
at supper, and then we have a potential alternate.
Okay.
the fame considered by the
Being
select.
considered. So we do only have one.
There's room for alternates though. If people are really interested in planning and want to learn more about the planning process,
Become an alternate.
you could become an alternate, in which case you can be part of the conversation. You don't necessarily vote unless you're appointed, but it's a great way to expand your interest and knowledge base around it.
There, for the zoning board as well. Yes, where it has a lot of spots, school planning for alternate as well.
Yep.
And there's a different focus than what we saw tonight, but because another way you get small.
We're the Energy Commission. We need people.
Any other questions before we end this debate?
They feel the coming.
Thank you very much, everyone.
So much, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks for.